What does it take to bring down a thousand-year-old monarchy? The French Revolution wasn't just a moment in time. It was an earthquake that shattered the foundations of Europe. It began with economic desperation and philosophical rebellion, and ended with mass executions, the rise of Napoleon, and a world forever changed. In this video, we're diving deep into the full story, from its complex causes to the Reign of Terror, to Napoleon's rise, and even the revolution's effect on women and colonized peoples. This is the complete breakdown of the French Revolution here on History Unveiled. By the late 18th century, France was a nation on the brink. The Ancien Régime, a rigid social structure of kings, nobles, and clergy, had dominated for centuries. But this structure was deeply unequal. Society was divided into three estates: the first estate, the clergy; the second estate, the nobility; and the third estate, everyone else: peasants, merchants, artisans, and the burgeoning bourgeoisie. Despite making up 97% of the population, the third estate bore the brunt of taxes. Nobles and clergy enjoyed lavish lifestyles, tax exemptions, and political influence. The average peasant, meanwhile, faced rising food prices, stagnant wages, and frequent famine. On top of this, France was broke. Decades of war, especially the 7 Years' War and financial support for the American Revolution, had emptied the royal treasury. King Louis XVI continued extravagant spending, ignoring desperate calls for reform. But the economic collapse was only part of the story. The real fuel for revolution came from new ideas. The Enlightenment, led by thinkers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and Montesquieu, challenged the divine right of kings and proposed radical concepts like individual liberty, secularism, and popular sovereignty. France had become a pressure cooker. All it needed was a spark. In 1789, the French crown had no choice but to confront the crisis. Louis XVI called a meeting of the Estates General, a legislative body that hadn't been summoned in 175 years. Its goal, to find a solution to the financial crisis. But when the Third Estate realized they were outvoted by the privileged classes, they broke away, forming the National Assembly and pledging to write a constitution. They famously swore the tennis court oath, vowing not to disband until France had a new government. Then came the spark. On July 14th, 1789, a mob stormed the Bastille, a royal prison in Paris that symbolized tyranny and absolute monarchy. The storming wasn't just symbolic. It was a direct message to the king. The people would no longer be silent. The revolution spread rapidly. Peasants in the countryside attacked manors in the Great Fear, burning feudal records and reclaiming their land. In August, the National Assembly issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a revolutionary document inspired by the Enlightenment and the American Declaration of Independence. It proclaimed that men are born and remain free and equal in rights. It was the beginning of a new France, but also the start of chaos. Initially, the revolutionaries tried to create a constitutional monarchy, but Louis XVI, ever indecisive, attempted to flee the country in 1791. He was caught, returned to Paris, and seen as a traitor. Trust in the monarchy collapsed. In 1792, France was declared a republic. Louis was put on trial for treason and, in January 1793, guillotined before a cheering crowd. His wife, Marie Antoinette, followed later that year. Now, with the king dead, the revolution entered its most radical and violent phase. Under the leadership of Robespierre and the Jacobins, the government launched the Reign of Terror, a year-long purge of anyone suspected of being an enemy of the revolution. The guillotine became a symbol of justice and terror. Over 16,000 people were executed, many without trial. Even leading revolutionaries like Danton were not spared. Robespierre, who claimed to defend liberty, soon resembled a tyrant. He pushed for virtue through fear, justifying executions as necessary to save the republic. But his grip eventually broke. In 1794, he was arrested and guillotined, ending the terror. France was exhausted. The revolution had devoured its own children. After Robespierre's fall, a more moderate government, the Directory, took over. But it was weak, corrupt, and unpopular. The chaos of revolution had left France vulnerable. In the midst of this instability, a military genius emerged. Napoleon Bonaparte, a Corsican artillery officer who had risen through revolutionary ranks, staged a coup d'état in 1799 and became first consul. By 1804, he crowned himself Emperor of the French. Ironically, the revolution that began with cries of liberty ended with the rise of a new autocrat. But Napoleon wasn't just a dictator, he was a reformer. He created the Napoleonic Code, which enshrined many revolutionary ideals: equality before the law, secular education, and merit-based advancement. While he curtailed political freedoms, he preserved the social transformations the revolution had unleashed. The French Revolution didn't just transform France, it shook the world. It abolished feudal privileges, redefined citizenship, and inspired revolutions in Europe and Latin America. Figures like Simón Bolívar and Giuseppe Garibaldi were influenced by revolutionary France. The revolution also redefined the relationship between the people and the state. Popular sovereignty, the idea that political power belongs to the people, became a cornerstone of modern democracy. Concepts like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and equal rights under the law were now global ideals. But the revolution also showed the dangers of extremism. It raised enduring questions. Can liberty survive without order? What happens when justice becomes vengeance? For centuries, the Catholic Church had been France's spiritual backbone and a pillar of royal authority. But during the Revolution, religion became a battlefield. The Church was part of the privileged First Estate, exempt from taxes and owning massive swaths of land. But to the revolutionaries, it wasn't just a religious institution. It was a symbol of oppression and inequality. In 1790, the National Assembly passed the Civil Constitution of the Clergy, turning priests into state employees and forcing them to swear allegiance to the revolution, not the Pope. Many refused. Churches were torn between juring priests who obeyed and non-juring priests who resisted. Then came a wave of radicalism. During the Reign of Terror, revolutionaries launched the Dechristianization campaign. Crosses were ripped down, churches were shut or turned into temples of reason. Saints were replaced with philosophers. Even the calendar was changed. The Republican calendar replaced Christian holidays with abstract ideals like virtue and labor. But this assault on faith had consequences. Rural communities, deeply Catholic, rose in revolt, most famously in the Vendée, where priests led counter-revolutionary armies. The conflict was brutal. Some historians even call it the Revolution's first civil war. In their fight for freedom, the revolutionaries pushed too far, alienating many of the very people they hoped to liberate. The French Revolution wasn't just a political earthquake, it was a cultural revolution. From what people wore to how they spoke, nothing was spared. Out went powdered wigs in aristocratic fashion. In came the look of the people, sans culotte, literally without breeches, wore long trousers to reject elite style. Women ditched corsets, powdered their faces less, and embraced revolutionary colors. Even language was transformed. Titles like Monsieur and Madame became citoyen and citoyenne. The monarchy was out. Equality was in. Symbols became powerful tools of unity and propaganda. The tricolor flag, blue for Paris, red for revolution, white for the monarchy, became the new national standard. The Phrygian cap, once worn by freed Roman slaves, became a symbol of liberty. The figure of Marianne emerged, a female personification of the Republic, strong, virtuous, and free. In the arts, painters like Jacques-Louis David immortalized revolutionary martyrs and events. His painting, The Death of Marat, turned a political assassination into religious iconography. Every banner, brushstroke, and garment became a weapon in the revolution's arsenal. This was more than regime change. It was the birth of modern political identity. The French Revolution was not a monolithic movement. It was an ideational war that was a civil war, waged not just in the streets but in pamphlets, debates, and guillotine squares. Political parties were at its core, each having their own vision of liberty. The Jacobins, led by Maximilien Robespierre, were radical Republicans. They believed in direct democracy, total equality, and severe justice. The Reign of Terror was their creation, and they believed it justified. Opposing them were the Girondins. Liberal revolutionaries who called for change but feared violence on the part of the mob. They dreamed of a republic with no bloodshed. Most of them paid the ultimate price. Outside Parliament, the sans-culottes, the city laborers and craftsmen, demanded price controls, universal suffrage, and social justice. Their voice drove the revolution on the streets. Secretly, meanwhile, royalists plotted to put the king back on the throne, with the help of foreign armies like those of Prussia and Austria. These ideological fault lines were more than temporary chaos. They gave birth to the modern left-right political spectrum. The Jacobins sat on the left side of the assembly hall, the conservatives on the right. That alignment still shapes politics today. The revolution proved that liberty is fragile, and ideology can be as lethal as despotism. The French Revolution changed the world, not only uprooting monarchies, spawning new countries, and transforming the understanding of what it meant to be free, but it was also a movement born from hunger and hope, philosophy and rage, idealism and blood. And now I can say its legacy lives on, not just in our textbooks, but in every protest, every constitution, and every demand for justice throughout the world. This has been History Unveiled. If you learned something new today, please like and subscribe and ring the bell for more stories that have changed the world.